My name is Kevin Tachi. I will be your host for the next 20 or 30 minutes. And what we do here is we talk, we have conversations, and we talk about the things that are important, things that are relevant, that are happening. Joining us today, he is the president of the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts. He is also a Whitman firefighter, paramedic. We have Rich McKinnon joining us. Rich, thank you for joining us for a conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin, for the invite. I always appreciate it.
Absolutely. And just a reminder for folks who may or may not know, who are not in the fire service, what is it that the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, what does the organization do?
Sure. So the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts represent 223 locals across the state. Basically, any full-time fire department across the state are represented by the PFFM. They each have their own local within their community. They belong to us, the state organization, and also the International Association of Firefighters, which is throughout the U.S. and Canada.
You know, if you thought about it a couple of years ago when you were elected president, could you have seen COVID-19 on the horizon?
No, I don't think I could have. Quite frankly, anyone in the midst of it now. I know we have great teams in place in Massachusetts, and our hospitals and our healthcare systems and our fire and EMS systems. But to see the length of this and the depth of everything that it's touching, I don't think a plan, personal opinion, obviously, and experience, I don't think a plan could have expanded to what we actually saw and are experiencing and still experiencing.
You were kind enough to have a conversation with me at the onset of this, I want to say late March, early April, and kind of giving kind of a bird's eye view as to what's happening, not only as from hearing from membership, but being somebody who was dealing with it in your own department. Here we are, fast forward several months later. Where do we stand with COVID-19 as someone who's out there day in and day out seeing this and helping victims?
Sure. So what we saw, early on was a lot of unknowns, which there still is. Early on, the great lack of PPE for our members, for our healthcare members, for all industries, throughout. And the lack of PPE, the lack of knowledge on where we can get appropriate PPE or even what appropriate PPE was. So that's something that's gotten a lot better. That was, early on, we were advocating for our members, have proper PPE, the N95 mask. We had the issues with the KN95 mask that came in from China. And early on, it was obviously, and is at the priority of us as a union, is the safety and well-being of our members. So it was instituting proper protocols, proper PPE, and proper protections. One thing that we stressed early on was that if we did come down and got diagnosed with COVID on our own, that it was presumed job-related. So that was another, top priority of the PFFM. Moving on, one thing that we've been stressing to our members and to the public as I speak now is not to be complacent. This virus is still very much alive and having an effect on the public, especially as we start these and are going through the reopening phases. We're going to see spikes. You can't help it. As more people go out, as more people interact, we're going to see spikes. And as good as Massachusetts has dealt with it compared to other states, as we're seeing, we are going to see some large numbers come back in the near future, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that because that's a great segue. My question, knowing that at the time of this conversation that you and I are having, we've seen drastically low numbers, less than 2% of the folks of positive tests, but it's kind of been ticking upwards. What are your thoughts as to what we've been seeing on the news in other parts of the country as we're seeing spikes in Florida, Texas, California, just to name a few?
No doubt it's scary. I am confident, and I'll take kind of some honor in the fact that Massachusetts has done a fairly good job in the reopening process, in stressing masks, in stressing, quarantines if you're traveling in from different places of high risk. So I think one thing Massachusetts has done from other parts of the country that I've seen is to be pretty proactive in our reopening phase. Obviously, maybe not as fast as we'd like to see, but again, this is all dictated on data and what we're seeing for numbers. So obviously, yeah, we would like to just turn a key or flip a switch and have everything go back to normal and be able to have events and, do what we normally did. But unfortunately, we can't. And I do think that Massachusetts and this region have done, the best they could under difficult circumstances.
And I'm going to ask you a personal question, and just your opinion as not as somebody who's the president of a union, not as a firefighter, but as Rich McKinnon. Do you feel that some people aren't taking this seriously enough, and that people, again, you see this day in and day out, so you would be the authority to say, I see this. This is real. This is serious. Am I correct in saying that this is something not to mess around with it, that we should be wearing masks at all times and be cognizant of this?
Yeah, I personally agree with the mask wearing policy. I do think, and I don't necessarily know that people are just, kind of shrugging it off, saying it's nothing. Again, it goes back to complacency. Maybe they've been doing this and they haven't gotten sick, knock on wood, so they feel, that, well, it's gone and we're not seeing it in the news as much, although we still see it in the news, but not as much. It's not 24/7. We're not seeing the full lockdown, so it was, all eyes were on it. But until there's a vaccine or a cure or how to treat it better, this is something that's still running rampant. So I don't know that there's necessarily like just people snubbing their nose at it. I think, again, it's just complacency. And as things wear on and they haven't been affected, then maybe, they lose interest, if you will.
I think it's worth, segueing from talking about COVID-19. Early on, I felt that how folks felt about the police, the fire, the medical workers, healthcare professionals, the folks who stocked the shelves in the grocery stores, there was an appreciation. Tell me what that was like to see that appreciation.
It was great, and I think in a lot of ways the appreciation is still there. But during that time of, heightened pandemic and the initial quarantine, our public is, they've always been with us, and it's great to see. Sometimes it takes an incident or a tragedy to really kind of, get people's interest sparked up a little more than normal, if you will. But we definitely saw the outpouring from the public with all regards, police, fire, grocery store workers, healthcare workers. It is truly amazing. It means a lot to us, and it keeps us going. Just working in the firehouse, we had, typically at holidays, we see an influx of people dropping off food and coffee and goodies and things like that, because they know we're away from our families working, on holidays. And they knew that, we were away from our families working longer hours, longer shifts, longer time working in the firehouse. So we saw that again. We saw people, even just thank you cards and the signs, and people would drop stuff off. It does definitely mean a lot to us.
So, not too long ago, we saw an incident in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that really has resonated with folks, not only around the country, but around the world. And that was the death of George Floyd at the knee of a police officer who is now charged with his death. and it sparked social change, social unrest with a group of folks that your brothers and sisters in the fire service work with. Talk to me how it's had an effect or an impact on the fire service, the death and the call for change and ways to eradicate systematic racism or systemic racism. How is that affecting your department, and how is that affecting your brothers and sisters in the PFFM?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we respond with our brothers and sisters in the police on the majority of our calls, whether it's medicals, whether it's fires, whether it's motor vehicle accidents, whether it's behavioral health issues. So we have a strong bond with them. And we have a very difficult job, and we're put in very difficult situations of life and death. The wrong decision could literally mean you being killed in the line of duty. So we have a strong bond with our police, and I have full trust in the police that I work with every day on every call, just like I do with my brothers and sisters in the firehouse. To see, and there's no doubt that some reforms are needed. No one is denying that. It's how we go about reforming. And I think personally, there's been kind of a wide net cast out on all police, which is wrong. Is there issues? Yep. Does reforms need to be made? Yes. Is there a process that all stakeholders should have a say in what the outcomes are? Absolutely. Because I think oftentimes when, we like to say, yeah, it looks good on paper, but when you try to institute that out in the streets, it really doesn't work. So I think that, what frustrates us as a union more is the process. That sometimes we don't feel we have a seat at the table and that these changes are just arbitrarily made. So it has had an effect. If anything, with us, it's brought us closer with our police departments. I think we've seen that in some of the social media and some of the outpouring of backing our police departments. Because they do an incredible job and very difficult job.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned it as far as the unity between the two departments, which always work together. You don't see there's a fire. It isn't just fire apparatus showing up. You've got police that are there and they're interacting and an integral part of helping that scene, not only keeping the scene clear so the fire department can do their job, but also making sure people are safe as well. But recently, an individual wrote a letter in the town of Hingham about a flag, a very special flag. Could you kind of give the thoughts on the? Seems like there's a little bit of a conversation going on in regards to a flag, whether it has a blue line, a blue and red line. Give me your thoughts on what happened in Hingham and what's going on in regards to the support of this particular flag.
Yeah, I'd be happy to report on that. So that particular flag was in memory of Sergeant Chesna, who was killed, murdered in the performance of his duties. That's what that particular flag meant. Obviously, Hingham is in close relationship with Weymouth. Again, the smaller communities of the South Shore, we all go to mutual aid to everyone's town. So I know all the guys in Abington. I know all the guys in Rockland. I know all, same on both sides, police and fire, because we respond to the same incidents. So that flag had a special meaning to the Hingham Fire Department. And for one individual just to arbitrarily affect change like that with no process, based on his opinion, which has every right to have that opinion, and the knee-jerk reactions by the town and the town manager and the board of selectmen, that's what we take, personal. So when that incident was brought up, initially, the fire chief stated that it was against the town policy. So working with our locals in the PFFM, as we typically do, the local president asked, well, let me see that written policy. And they couldn't produce it because it wasn't one. So just today, I understand that now all of a sudden there's a written policy that they got passed at a selectmen's meeting. So we actually took it upon ourselves to decide how we are going to take down that flag. So we had the police union of Weymouth, we had the fire union of Weymouth, we had the police union in Hingham, and we had our union firefighters in Hingham ceremonially take down that flag today. And those flags, we do have a plan for them that will be coming forth with. And but it's something that, you know, everything has meaning to us. The job as a firefighter and a lot of the traditions of a police officer, you know, we are steeped in tradition, and we take our job very seriously, and we take our fallen, our brothers and sisters that have died in the line of duty on both sides, we take very seriously and never forget.
But one would think that if policy has been written and something that's already been in use, that those flags or that particular flag would be grandfathered in, but anything in the future would, of course, fall under the guise of the policy. Is that not the case?
It's not the case here, it seems. You know, again, we're all for, you know, there's a right and a wrong way to do things, and there's hearings, there's policy, everyone has their opinion. But this was just, I think, a knee-jerk reaction that, you know, one citizen, a college student, had an opinion. And I think the officials of the town of Hingham overreacted, quite frankly.
Let's kind of talk a little bit about, you know, we're talking about the situation with police and the fire, knowing that legislation has been worked on over the past few weeks between the House, the state Senate, and House Representatives. We know that particular bill that's calling for law enforcement reform is now in a conference committee. Give me your take on this particular bill, because a lot of folks think that this is just basically geared towards whether it's reallocating funds for the police department or putting in place things, putting reforms in place when it comes to policing itself and training and qualifications. Is that necessarily the case, or will this have will this also have an effect across other public safety units, whether it's yourself or you name it?
Sure. So initially, the governor's bill was, I believe, 16 or 19 pages. And I give the governor credit. He was ahead of the curve before the George Floyd incident. And he was working with stakeholders on creating a police reform and police misconduct bill. He had the Black and Latina caucus, he had management, he had the police unions, and they had a narrow scope of what they wanted to cover. And they did a good job at it. Now enters the Senate and the House. Their bills are over 100 pages. And again, it goes to casting that wide net and reaching out, expanding the scope of what needed to be done. In a lot of ways affected our right to collectively bargain, a change in our working conditions, and it turned into an anti-labor bill in the Senate and in a lot of ways in the House, more so in the Senate. The Senate bill had implications on all public employees. The House bill, just the police. So, you know, we felt a need and a priority this was an attack on labor. And we weren't going to stand for that. And then you have enter the MMA, or Mass Municipal Association, with some very damaging testimony saying that the bill doesn't go far enough, that they have to open up the collective bargaining law, that they have to open up and look at Joint Labor Management Committee for police and fire, look at civil service, open up civil service and make changes to civil service. Again, they turned it into an attack on labor, which if they're going to be in an arena in a fight, then we're getting in too, and we'll punch it out. Because that's the soul of a union, is the right to collectively bargain, the right to fight for our working conditions. And that's all we want. We want to see at the table. As any union, we want to see at the table. We want to let our thoughts and expectations known of how this could affect us. In a lot of ways, negatively affect us.
How about as far as indemnification, if it comes to whether you're a police officer, a paramedic, or a firefighter, you're giving life-saving, you're trying to save someone's life, and something goes right. Is there any provisions in the bill that could make someone accountable if, in fact, if you're providing these methods to someone to save their life and something goes wrong?
There are. So the issue of indemnification and immunity, two different issues. So the immunity piece in the Senate bill captures all public employees. The immunity piece in the House carves out public employees and is just for police. So that in its own raises some issues because, again, we do the same job, we're making the same decisions. That is what it is. The indemnification piece is the city or town, the law says may indemnify you, doesn't say shall. So that's on the city or town. And if you think that a city or town is going to choose to indemnify you when now you're increasing the ability to sue, you're nuts. This isn't going to happen. So, we saw that as an issue. One of the amendments we supported was changing that may to shall, which obviously got withdrawn and they didn't want to do that. And quite honestly, the immunity questions, what it covers, the scope of it, there's so many unknowns. Everyone has a different opinion on it. We work with some great attorneys in labor, throughout labor, and everyone has a different take on it. And until there's actually a case that sets a precedent, like any type of new law or legislation, we don't know. So we can only go on what we're being told by our legal teams as possible implications, how this is going to affect our membership. So it's our job to inform our members of that. And they can create their own opinion, which a lot of them have, and a lot of them have been very vocal, which I'm very proud of as their president.
So I would ask you, knowing that, again, it's in conference committee, what can be done now? Is it a matter of, do you feel that depending on how this comes out of that committee will be whether or not the governor signs it or vetoes it or sends it back? I mean, can anything further be done by the citizens of Massachusetts?
The citizens of Massachusetts, I mean, they elect their reps, senators, and their governor. So, yeah, they always have a voice. And with due respect, I mean, I'll give the reps and senators credit and the governor. They've always had an open door policy. They've been very receptive to us, and they still are. And they are to all their constituents. It's a tough job. There's no doubt about it. But they're always willing to listen, to take into people's considerations. As far as the process, I believe the conference committee will produce a bill that will have to go back to the House and Senate to be voted on and sent to the governor. The governor at that point can sign it, or he can make changes and send it back. One thing that, we've been a little disgruntled with is this whole process. You can't do the sweeping reform that has a lot of legal implications, a lot of unknowns in 2 weeks. When we file a piece of legislation at the beginning of the session, it often takes 2 years to go through all the processes. There's different committees, there's different hearings, and everyone says, not everyone, I should say, but a lot of people say nothing gets done on Beacon Hill. That's bull. I see the process every day. The process is amazing, and it works, and it's great. Everyone has a say. Everyone has a chance at these hearings. And I applaud them on Beacon Hill for what they do in the process that happens. And we just didn't get that. We got this rushed. So another thing that I was pleased to see was the House agreed. Typically, they stop formal session on the 31st. They agreed to extend formal session as needed, moving forward to the end of the year. So I think that will give us some time again to have these conversations, to have what the true impact of this legislation will be. So I'm confident in hoping the Senate will do the same and extend their formal sessions, and so we can have more talks on this.
Rich, we're about to wrap up our great segment here. And again, I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat and share this information with the folks here on the South Shore. Anything that we haven't touched upon, or anything you want to kind of reinforce as we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah, no, just, we're very proud of the communities and the people we serve. And I just hope they're proud of us. We get that a lot of times we get that they are. Another thing that, when people call the fire department, typically they want us there. And oftentimes the police are called into some very different, dangerous situations than we are. But know that, we work with our police every day, and their intentions are always, they have the same intentions we do, is to serve the public, mitigate problems, and protect public safety. And I'm very proud of our police departments that I work with every day on the South Shore.
Again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to more conversations with you as developments happen. Absolutely.
Thank you, Kevin.
You got it. And thank you very much for tuning in to this particular segment. More as again, as I said to President of the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, Rich McKinnon, who's been our guest. As things happen, as new issues arise, we'll do our best to make sure we have folks in front of the camera and discussing them. Thank you for tuning in.